What happens when a man who has everything realizes he lost what truly mattered? Ethan Carter, a powerful billionaire CEO, chose ambition over love, walking away from his wife Lila without knowing she was pregnant. 10 years later, a chance encounter at a mall shatters his carefully constructed world when he sees twin girls who bear an uncanny resemblance to him. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon at Midtown Plaza, the heart of the city's hustle and bustle. The mall teemed with life, families browsing shop windows, children begging for treats, and the faint hum of music blending into the murmur of conversations. Amidst the crowd, Ethan Carter walked with the measured pace of a man who commanded empires, yet seemed perpetually restless. A real estate tycoon with properties spanning continents, Ethan moved through the world as if he owned it. Yet, deep down, he felt a gnawing emptiness, an unshakable sense of disconnection, and the suspension of death, the feeling of a lifetime's work of death that must be consumed before the universe can be filled with something better. He wasn't here for leisure. A high-profile meeting over coffee had brought him to the mall, and his black luxury sedan waited outside, its engine quietly idling for his return. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks as he walked, his mind already racing ahead to his next deal. But then, something made him stop. Across the atrium, a woman stood near a boutique window. She had long, dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders and an effortless grace that seemed familiar. Beside her were two young girls, their identical features and synchronized gestures catching his attention. At first, it was curiosity. Then it hit him like a thunderclap. The girls, no older than 10, had his piercing green eyes, the same sharp jawline, and even the slight tilt of their chins. The resemblance was unmistakable. His chest tightened. He knew the woman too. It was Lila Bennett, the artist he had once loved with an intensity he hadn't thought possible. The woman he'd left behind when he chose ambition over love. A woman he hadn't seen in a decade. The world around Ethan seemed to fade, the chatter and music receding into a dull hum. He stood frozen, staring at the family he hadn't never known existed. The girls weren't just striking a resemblance. They were his daughters. And Lila had never told him. Ethan's breath hitched as he took an involuntary step forward, but before he could speak or act, Lila turned. Her gaze swept across the crowd until it landed on him. Her face went from calm to stunned, and then, just as quickly, to guarded. Without a word, she placed protective arms around the girls and guided them toward the escalators, disappearing into the crowd. For the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt utterly powerless, and for the first time in his life, he was truly afraid. A decade earlier, Ethan Carter was a man consumed by ambition. He had grown up with nothing and clawed his way to the top of the cutthroat real estate world. By 30, he was a self-made millionaire. By 35, he was untouchable. But the cost of his success was clear. There was little room for anything or anyone else in his life. Then he met Lila Bennett. She had walked into his world like a flash of color in an otherwise monochrome existence. Lila was an artist, her hands often speckled with paint, and her eyes alight with passion for everything she touched. They met at a charity event, a world she inhabited reluctantly, and he dominated effortlessly. Ethan hadn't intended to notice her, but Lila had a way of pulling people in. She talked about art, dreams, and life as if they were enshrined on life, as if they were intertwined. Her energy intoxicating. For a brief, fleeting time, Lila made Ethan believe in something more than profits and power. They spent nights talking until dawn, their worlds colliding in ways he couldn't have anticipated. Her laughter softened his edges, and her vision for a life filled with creativity and meaning gave him glimpses of a world outside boardrooms and balance sheets. But love, Ethan decided, was a liability. As his company expanded and the demands of his empire grew, he began to pull away. He told himself it was necessary. Marriage, children, these were distractions that would only weaken his focus. Lila didn't see it coming when Ethan broke things off. His words were clinical, as if he were negotiating a contract. You deserve more than I can give you. I need to stay focused. Focused. The word had haunted Ethan for years. He'd walked away, thinking he was doing the right thing. In truth, he was afraid. Afraid of vulnerability, of commitment, of anything that couldn't be measured in profit margins. What he didn't know was that Leela was already carrying his children. She had called him once, a week after he left, but Ethan didn't answer. He was in the middle of a crucial merger. When he saw her name flash on his phone, he silenced it without a second thought. She never tried again. Lila moved away soon after, vanishing from his life as completely as he had vanished from hers. Ethan buried the memory of her under layers of work and wealth, telling himself he had made the right choice. But now, standing in the middle of Midtown Plaza, the faces of the two little girls with green eyes told him otherwise. His past had caught up with him, and for the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt the weight of what he had lost. Ethan stood in the middle of the bustling mall, his mind reeling. The sight of the girls, the realization of their resemblance to him. It all hit with the force of a freight train. His perfectly structured life, meticulously built on control and ambition, suddenly felt fragile. He couldn't stop replaying the moment he saw Lila's face. It was unmistakable. These were his daughters, and Lila had kept them from him. As the crowd moved around him, Ethan's heart raced with questions. Why hadn't she told him? Had she hated him so much? Or had she assumed he wouldn't care? The thought was like a knife twisting in his chest. He clenched his fists, trying to steady himself, but the tidal wave of emotions wouldn't relent. Regret, anger, guilt, and an ache he couldn't name. He forced himself to move, his feet carrying him to the parking lot, where his driver waited in the sleek black sedan. Sliding into the back seat, Ethan leaned his head against the cool leather. Normally, the car was his sanctuary, a place where he could think clearly, but now it felt suffocating. He barked an order at his driver, "Circle the mall." The SUV cruised around the busy streets as Ethan's sharp green eyes scanned every corner, searching for Lila and the girls. But they were gone. The drive back to his penthouse was silent, save for the faint hum of the engine. Once inside, Ethan poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. The city skyline stretched before him, a glittering testament to his success. Yet, for the first time, it felt meaningless. He pulled out his phone, scrolling aimlessly, until his finger hovered over a photo he hadn't looked at in years. Lila's face smiled back at him from the screen. The image was from their honeymoon, before the arguments, the long business trips, and the walls he had built between them. She looked radiant, her eyes full of hope, her hand resting on his chest. Ethan remembered the days she'd sent him the picture, with a simple caption, "For when you need a reason to smile." Now the photo felt like a wound reopening. He closed his eyes, letting the memories flood in. He thought of Leela's laughter, the way she'd challenge him to slow down and see the world through her lens. She'd made him feel alive in a way nothing else ever had. But when the pressure of his rising career intensified, he'd pushed her aside, convincing himself it was for the best. Ethan opened his eyes, his jaw tightening. He wasn't the same man he'd been back then. Or was he? The question lingered, gnawing at him. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Ethan's determination solidified. He couldn't leave this unresolved. He couldn't ignore the truth staring him in the face. Those girls were his daughters, and he needed to know why Lila had kept them from him. By mid-afternoon, his assistant, Mia, handed him a slim folder. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Ethan could sense her curiosity. "You asked for everything we could find on Lila Bennett," she said quietly. Ethan flipped through the pages. The details of Lila's life unfolded before him. After leaving New York, she'd moved to Boston. She worked as a curator at a small but prestigious art gallery, a job that fit her creative nature. The twins, Clara and Sienna, were 10 years old, born shortly after Ethan had walked away. The timeline hit him like a punch to the gut. He leaned back in his chair, the folder slipping from his fingers. Clara and Sienna, his daughters. A surge of anger rose within him. Why had Lila kept them a secret? Had she done it out of spite, or had she truly believed he wouldn't care? The questions churned in his mind as he stared at the ceiling. Later that week, Ethan found himself parked outside the gallery where Lila worked. The modest brick building was worlds away from the glass towers he frequented. He hesitated, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. He wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Instead, he stepped inside the gallery, blending into the small crowd admiring the artwork. His eyes scanned the room until they found her. Lila stood in the center, speaking to a patron. Her voice was calm, confident, her presence magnetic. She hadn't changed much. Her hair was tied loosely, strands framing her face in a way he remembered vividly. Ethan's chest tightened as he watched her, guilt and longing colliding in his heart. Suddenly, her gaze flicked to him. Her smile faltered, her expression shifting to surprise, then steely resolve. She excused herself from the conversation and walked toward him, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked, her voice low but firm. He searched for the right words, but none came. Instead, he blurted the one question that had haunted him since that moment in the mall. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lila's eyes narrowed, her stance stiffening. She crossed her arms, a clear barrier between them. "Tell you what, Ethan?" she asked, her voice icy. "That I was pregnant when you decided your empire was more important than us? That I raised 2 daughters alone while you were busy climbing the corporate ladder?" Her words were like daggers, each one sinking deeper than the last. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. How could he defend a decision that now felt so indefensible? "I deserve to know," he said finally, his voice low but strained. "They're my daughters too." Lila let out a bitter laugh. "You think knowing would have changed anything? Ethan, you made it clear back then. You didn't want a family. You didn't want us. I wasn't going to beg you to care." The weight of her words pressed down on him, leaving Ethan momentarily speechless. The guilt he'd buried for years now roared to the surface. He had walked away without looking back, and in doing so, he'd lost more than he could have imagined. "I was wrong," Ethan admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I made a mistake, one I've regretted every day since." Lila's expression softened, but only for a moment. She shook her head, her resolve unshaken. "Regret doesn't fix anything, Ethan. It doesn't give you the right to walk back into our lives like nothing happened. Clara and Sienna don't even know you exist." Those words hit harder than he anticipated. They didn't know him. He had missed their first steps, their first words, their entire childhood so far. A hollow ache settled in his chest as he realized the depth of his absence. "They deserve to know," Ethan said quietly, his voice firming. "They deserve to know the truth. That I'm their father." Lila stepped closer, her tone laced with quiet anger. "What they deserve is stability, love. I've given them that. You forfeited that right when you left." Incredibly, Karen's right hand dropped to the side of the desk, and her hand came up quickly with a crystal. The tension between them was palpable, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. Ethan clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. I'm not asking to undo the past, Lila. I can't. But I want to be in their lives now. I want to make things right. For a moment, Lila didn't respond. She looked away, her expression a mixture of frustration and something softer, perhaps doubt. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. They don't need more chaos, Ethan. If you really want to be part of their lives, it has to be on my terms. Slowly. No sudden appearances, no grand gestures. You'll be introduced as a friend. The word stung more than Ethan wanted to admit, but he nodded. If that's what it takes, he said, his voice steady, I'll do whatever it takes. Lila's lips pressed into a thin line as she studied him, searching for sincerity. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. Don't make me regret this. I won't, Ethan promised, his green eyes locking onto hers with a quiet determination. I won't walk away again. Without another word, Lila turned and walked back toward the gallery floor. Ethan watched her go, a mix of hope and trepidation swirling in his chest. This wasn't just about proving himself to Lila. It was about earning the trust of two little girls who didn't yet know he existed. And Ethan was determined not to fail them. Ethan's world shifted in the days that followed. The high-stakes deals and towering skyscrapers that once consumed him now felt secondary to the new mission before him, earning a place in the lives of Clara and Sienna. He was a man accustomed to control, but this time, control wasn't an option. He would have to play by Lila's rules. Their first meeting was arranged at a small cafe near the twins' school. Ethan arrived early, nerves fraying as he waited. The cafe, with its warm wood tones and the scent of freshly baked pastries, felt strangely intimate, a sharp contrast to the cold, sterile boardrooms he usually inhabited. He had faced down hostile investors and billion-dollar negotiations, but nothing had prepared him for this. The bell above the door jingled, and Ethan's heart raced. Lila entered, a protective hand on each of the girls' shoulders. Clara, the quieter twin, looked around cautiously, while Sienna's bubbly personality shone as she chattered about something that had happened at school. Ethan stood, his hands clasped tightly to mask his anxiety. "Girls, this is Ethan," Lila said, her voice measured. "He's an old friend of mine." Sienna was the first to react, her wide brown eyes lighting up with curiosity. "Do you like chocolate croissants?" she asked with a grin. "They're my favorite." Ethan chuckled, taken aback by her openness. "I do," he said, his voice warm. "Especially with extra chocolate." Sienna beamed, but Clara remained silent, her gaze flicking between Ethan and her mother. Ethan didn't push. He let the conversation flow naturally, letting the girls' energy guide the moment. By the time they left, Sienna had invited him to her next soccer game, while Clara simply offered a polite goodbye. Over the next few weeks, Ethan immersed himself in the girls' lives under Lila's watchful eye. He attended their soccer games, where Sienna darted across the field with boundless energy, while Clara held a steady strategic position on defense. At each game, Ethan stayed at a respectful distance, cheering quietly but consistently. Sienna warmed to him quickly, her enthusiasm and curiosity making it easy for her to embrace new relationships. She would run up to him after games, her face flushed with excitement, recounting every play in vivid detail. Clara, however, was more reserved. She would acknowledge him with a small nod, but kept her distance, her guarded demeanor reminding him of Lila's quiet strength. One afternoon, after practice, Ethan saw Clara sitting on the sidelines, tying her sneakers with meticulous care. He hesitated, then approached slowly, careful not to intrude. "Hi, Clara," he said gently. "You played really well today." You've got great instincts on defense. Hey, Clara. Thanks for giving me a break in here. Clara glanced up, her expression unreadable. Thanks, she said softly, before returning her attention to her laces. Ethan sat down on the bench, leaving enough space between them. You know, when I was your age, I wasn't very good at soccer. I tripped over the ball more times than I'd like to admit. A small smile tugged at Clara's lips, though she quickly hid it. Really? Really, Ethan said with mock seriousness. My coach said I had 2 left feet. It was a pretty embarrassing. Clara giggled quietly, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Encouraged, he continued. Do you like playing soccer? She nodded, her voice a little more open now. It's fun. Sienna always cheers for me, even when I mess up. Ethan smiled. That's what sisters are for. Do you cheer for her too? Clara's face brightened. All the time. She's the fastest runner on the team. Clara hesitated, then asked, Why do you come to our games? Ethan's heart raced. He knew this moment would come, but he had to tread carefully. Because I like watching you and Sienna. You're both amazing. Clara studied him for a moment, her young eyes wise beyond her years. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay. It wasn't much, but to Ethan, it was everything. Lila, watching from a distance, noticed the small shift in Clara's demeanor. As Ethan approached her after the game, she crossed her arms, her expression neutral, but not unkind. She's warming up to you, Lila said quietly. Slowly, Ethan replied, but I'll take it. Lila nodded, her gaze softening. Don't get too comfortable. It's going to take more than a few games to earn her trust. Ethan met her eyes, his voice firm. I'm not going anywhere, Lila. For the first time, Lila didn't argue. Instead, she simply nodded, and for Ethan, that was enough. Ethan's progress with the girls seemed to be gaining momentum, but life, as it often does, threw an unexpected curveball. It was an ordinary weekday when Ethan's phone buzzed with a call from Lila. Her voice, usually calm and composed, trembled with urgency. Clara fainted during a doctor's visit. We're at the hospital. Ethan's heart dropped. I'm on my way, he said, already grabbing his keys and rushing out the door. When he arrived, the sterile fluorescent-lit hallway of the hospital greeted him, the antiseptic smell sharp in his nose. He found Lila sitting beside Clara's hospital bed, her face pale but resolute. Sienna sat in a chair nearby, clutching a stuffed animal tightly to her chest. What happened? Ethan asked, his voice low but filled with worry. Lila sighed, brushing a hand through her hair. The doctors say it's a minor heart condition. It's manageable, but we'll need to monitor it carefully. Ethan felt the weight of her words, the guilt pressing harder on his chest. I should have been here, he murmured, his voice cracking. I should have known. Lila looked at him, her expression softening for the first time in days. You're here now, she said simply. That's what matters. Ethan sat by Clara's bedside, his heart aching as he watched her sleep. She looked so small, so fragile, and yet there was a quiet strength about her, a resilience that reminded him of Lila. In the days that followed, Ethan stepped up in ways he never had before. He attended every doctor's appointment, researched her condition obsessively, and made arrangements to ensure she had the best care possible. Lila, though wary of his sudden involvement, couldn't deny the genuine effort he was making. One evening, as they sat together in the hospital room, Clara stirred awake. Her big, curious eyes blinked up at Ethan. Why are you always here now? She asked, her voice soft. The question struck Ethan like lightning. He glanced at Lila, who gave him a small nod, encouraging him to answer. Taking a deep breath, he leaned closer to Clara. Because you're important to me, he said gently. You and Sienna both. Clara studied him for a long moment, her young mind processing his words. Finally, she nodded, her expression thoughtful. It wasn't an embrace or a declaration of love, but it was a start. The crisis marked a turning point for Ethan. It wasn't just about earning Clara and Sienna's trust anymore. It was about proving to Lila and to himself that he could be the father they deserved. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild the family he had once abandoned. But as the pieces started to fall into place, Ethan realized that the past still held a tight grip on their future, and the road to redemption would be far from easy. Ethan's dedication to Clara and Sienna was becoming undeniable. He attended every appointment, every game, and every recital, doing everything he could to prove that he wasn't the man who had walked away. Slowly, Lila began to soften, though her walls remained firmly in place. But just as things seemed to be settling, the past resurfaced in an unexpected and confrontational way. It was a quiet evening when Ethan returned to his penthouse, his mind occupied with plans for the girls' upcoming school recital. As he stepped into the lobby, a familiar figure stood waiting, Ryan Taylor, Lila's longtime friend and confidant. Ryan's presence was as unexpected as it was unsettling. Suddenly, he found every afternoon precious, as he and Lila sat opening vinyl records. After he'd finished describing Ryan to Kester, her face twisted to an owlish covering of her features, her face screwed up indecisive. "Ryan?" Ethan greeted cautiously, his tone neutral. Ryan's expression was unreadable, but his eyes carried the weight of years of protective resentment. "I know what you're doing, Ethan," he said, his voice calm but cutting, "and I'm here to tell you that I won't let you hurt them again." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." Ryan stepped closer, his posture tense. "You already did. You left Lila when she needed you most. You left those girls before they were even born. And now you think you can just show up and fix everything? They're not pawns in your quest for redemption." The accusation hit hard, but Ethan stood his ground. "I know I made mistakes, Ryan," he said, his voice firm but steady. "I can't change the past, but I'm trying to be here now. For them, for Lila. I won't walk away again." Ryan shook his head, disbelief flickering across his face. "You think showing up a few times and throwing money at the situation makes you a father? You've missed 10 years, Ethan. 10 years. Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides, not out of anger, but out of frustration with himself. "I know," he admitted, his voice softening. "I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making up for it." Ryan studied him for a long moment, his gaze piercing. Finally, he spoke, his tone colder now. "They don't need you, Ethan. They've had a good life without you. Don't ruin it because you suddenly feel guilty." With that, Ryan turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the lobby, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. That night, Ethan sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. The glittering view, once a source of pride, now felt hollow. Ryan's words echoed in his mind, forcing him to confront an uncomfortable truth. His wealth, his power, his determination, none of it mattered if the people he cared about didn't trust him. He thought of Clara's cautious smiles, Sienna's boundless energy, and Lila's guarded eyes. They weren't just faces in his life now. They were the foundation of a future he desperately wanted to build. But trust wasn't given. It was earned. And Ethan realized he still had a long way to go. The next day, Ethan arrived at the gallery unannounced. It was a risky move, but he needed to speak to Lila without pretense, without carefully choreographed words. He found her in the middle of her work, her fingers brushing over a vibrant canvas, her expression peaceful. For a moment, he hesitated. She looked so content, so at home in this world she had built without him. "Lila," he called softly, breaking the spell. She turned, surprise flashing across her face, before it was quickly replaced by guarded suspicion. Crossing her arms, she asked, "What are you doing here, Ethan?" He stepped closer, his tone uncharacteristically gentle. "I need to talk to you, please." Lila hesitated, then gestured toward the back room. Once inside, the gallery's quiet hum faded, leaving only the tension between them. "I'm listening," she said, leaning against a table. Ethan took a deep breath. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter. Clara and Sienna, they matter. And so do you." Lila's eyes narrowed, her defenses rising. "Don't make this about me," she said sharply. "You had your chance, Ethan. You walked away." "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "And I'll regret it for the rest of my life, but I want to make it right. I'm not the man I was back then." Lila laughed bitterly. "You think you've changed? This isn't some business deal you can negotiate, Ethan. The girls have a good life. They don't need you complicating it." Ethan stepped closer, his green eyes earnest. "I'm not here to take anything away from them. I want to be part of their lives. I want to earn their trust. And yours." The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on both of them. Lila's gaze softened, though skepticism lingered in her expression. "Finally," she sighed, her voice quieter now. "If you want to be in their lives, you'll have to show me you're serious. And that starts with Clara. She's not like Sienna. She'll take time." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. "I'll do whatever it takes." Lila held his gaze for a moment longer before stepping back, her posture relaxing slightly. "Don't make me regret this, Ethan." "I won't," he promised. As he left the gallery, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't giving up. Not this time. The following weeks tested Ethan's patience and resolve. He honored Lila's terms, taking small, careful steps to integrate into Clara and Sienna's lives. Each interaction brought new challenges and small victories, and slowly, the fragile threads of trust began to form. Clara remained the greater challenge, while Sienna's bubbly personality made it easy for her to connect. Clara's guarded nature kept Ethan at arm's length. He attended her soccer practices, sat through piano recitals, and quietly celebrated her successes without expecting immediate recognition. His persistence didn't go unnoticed, but Clara's walls held firm. Then, one afternoon at the park, everything changed. Clara had been quiet during their walk, her brow furrowed in thought. Finally, she tugged on Lila's sleeve and whispered something. Lila knelt, nodding gently before turning to Ethan. "She wants to ask you something," Lila said softly, her expression a mix of encouragement and apprehension. Ethan crouched down to Clara's level, his heart pounding. "What is it, Clara?" The little girl looked him straight in the eyes, her gaze steady but unsure. "Are you my dad?" Time seemed to freeze. Ethan glanced at Lila, who gave him a small nod, signaling it was time for the truth. Taking a deep breath, he turned back to Clara. "Yes," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I am." Clara studied him for a long moment, her young face unreadable. Finally, she nodded, her expression softening. "Okay," she said quietly, then turned and ran toward the swings, where Sienna was waiting. It wasn't an embrace or an immediate bond, but it was more than Ethan had dared to hope for. It was a start. In the months that followed, Ethan worked tirelessly to solidify his place in their lives. He attended every soccer game, every recital, and every family dinner Lila allowed him to join. Slowly, Clara began to open up, sharing her thoughts and dreams in small, precious moments. Sienna, always the more outgoing of the two, fully embraced Ethan's presence, often pulling him into their games and conversations. Lila, too, began to soften. While her protectiveness never wavered, she couldn't ignore the genuine effort Ethan was making. She saw it in the way he listened to Clara, the way he laughed with Sienna, and the way he respected her boundaries. The man standing before her was no longer the cold, ambitious mogul she had once known. He was someone who had learned the value of love and connection. Someone willing to fight for what truly mattered. The final turning point came on a chilly autumn evening. Clara and Sienna were performing a duet at their school's recital, their small hands gliding over the piano keys in perfect harmony. Ethan sat in the audience, his heart swelling with pride as he watched them. Lila sat beside him, her posture relaxed for the first time in years. As the final note rang out and the audience erupted into applause, Ethan glanced at Lila. She turned to him, a small but genuine smile on her lips. It wasn't an overt declaration of forgiveness, but it was a step towards something new, a future where they could rebuild what had been lost. After the recital, Clara and Sienna ran to Ethan, their faces glowing with excitement. "Did you see us, Dad?" Sienna asked, her eyes sparkling. Ethan knelt, pulling them both into a hug. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." For the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt whole. The towering skyscrapers and vast fortunes he had once chased now paled in comparison to the joy of holding his daughters close. He glanced at Lila, who stood a few steps away, watching the scene with a quiet smile. Their eyes met, and in that moment, words weren't necessary. They both knew that while the road ahead would still have challenges, they had found something far more valuable than success: a family. Ethan's journey was one of redemption, patience, and love. It was a reminder that while mistakes cannot be undone, they can inspire transformation if we choose to confront them. For Ethan, the fight to reclaim his family was not about erasing the past, but proving day by day that he could build a better future. He learned that true success isn't found in skyscrapers or fortunes. It's in the quiet moments of connection, the laughter of his daughters, and the warmth of a family he almost lost. As the screen fades to black, the final image lingers. Ethan walking between Clara and Sienna, each holding one of his hands, while Lila follows close behind with a soft smile. Their laughter echoes through the crisp autumn air as leaves swirl around them, a vivid testament to the bonds they've rebuilt. It's not a perfect picture, but a family finally finding its way back to each other.